So this morning, the here and now Dhamma, this continuous reminder, enlightenment here and now, liberation is now, on and on like this, so that it's not like personal, it's not like I'm liberated now or I should be mindful now. So just to emphasize these pronouns, me and mine, I, and how we personalize, everything becomes stained with our personalities and the sense of ourself. And so this is, I should be enlightenment in here and now. All I have to do is just pay attention and I'm enlightened, is the kind of the Sakkaya Ditthi reaction to such statements as enlightenment here and now, liberation here and now, nibbana here and now. So that, reflect on that, because so that you begin to know this tendency of the human individual, and we've got strong egos to deal with. A sense of rights and self-importance and attachment to our values, principles, independence, freedom, self-assertion, being really me, and all these are the kind of ethos of the time, isn't it? It's a time to assert your individuality, to proclaim yourself. I'm just me, I am who I am. Just be yourself, and these are the things that I hear and have heard in my life affected this Sakkaya Ditthi. Stand up for yourself. All this, don't let anyone put you down, and self-assertion. They have special seminars on asserting yourself. Now, in a worldly sense, I'm nothing against that. It's not like I'm condemning that. But also, we need to put it in its perspective, so that that isn't our way of understanding life. The wisdom will never arise if we only operate from what I think, what I feel, my rights, my views. And so the mindfulness then is the gate, the door to the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. And that is outside the self-view. It's not Sakkaya Ditthi anymore. It's not, it's not me and mine. It's not proclaiming myself as a person, as an ego, as a physical entity that I identify with. There is the unborn. It's a statement about it's not I am the unborn, the uncreated. So it's not coming from language, from the pronouns, personal pronouns, possessive pronouns. It's a statement not to be grasped as an end in itself, but to be reflected upon. There is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. And therefore there is the escape from the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. Now that can be totally meaningless to many people, it just sounds, like something that doesn't make any sense in terms of maybe the worldly values that we have, the values of our culture, of our society, of our age. Is not, nobody talks about the unborn, uncreated, unformed, and escape from it. It's all about liberating yourself as a person. So human rights and all this are, they're about, me and mine, my rights, my life, my freedom, what I think. And so that emphasizes the separateness, that I'm separate from you, and that it's my duty to proclaim my rights, assert myself, and prove that I am somebody. Because to not be anybody is considered is usually regarded with contempt. A nobody. He's a nobody. He's not, doesn't have any fame, doesn't, just a mediocre milquetoast couch potato, nobody. And then you think of the strong personalities, the great egos, the charming, the charismatic, the celebrities. People have made something of themselves. This is worshipped and adored at this time. Is what news is, what people talk about. Then the reflective life of meditation is not taking sides that I should become a nobody. I've got to get rid of my assertive ego and my strong personality and in order to become a nobody. It's not about that I have to become anything or do anything, to change anything, other than see it from a different way. See the suffering. Notice the dukkha of being attached to myself as being important person with power, with rights, with good opinions, sensible views, admired by others, or the feeling of freedom from feeling that I'm just a nobody, my opinion doesn't count, I'm just, mediocre man with nobody pays attention to, an old man. That old people tend to get ignored these days. They're nobodies anymore when you get old. Unless you've got a really strong personality. Once you start going gaga, dementia and so forth, then they will just lock you away, put you somewhere, get you out of the way. So this is sense of nobody and somebody. And this awareness, the awareness then opens us to these attitudes of somebody and nobody. Because awareness isn't anybody, isn't the body, isn't the buddy. Learning to recognize this, this whole retreat, this formal retreat, the emphasis is on this encouraging, taking you to the stream. So my efforts in this direction, like taking the horse to water. So I don't see how I could, you're at the water, but you can't make a horse drink the water, so that's... We'll see how many can drink the water, will drink it. So the stream, isn't it? You can take the horse to water, so you're at the water's edge right now. It's important to get to know this ego, this sakkaya ditthi. Not judge it. It's not about developing a better personality or criticizing your personality. It's not about whether your personality is good or bad, but it's recognizing it. It's sakyadit, so it's put in this category of a sangyojana or a fetter. For convenience, it's not a kind of put down, like we shouldn't have personalities, but it's knowing this is personality, this is sakkaya ditthi, the ego, and it's all based on conditioning. It's not natural phenomena. It's a conditioned sense of self, this identity with the body, with the language that we use, the way we think, the thoughts, the memories. I am, me and mine. And this on a conventional level is all right. I mean, we all have to use the convention of I'm Ajahn Sumedho, and I have I was born 75 years ago and things like this. And so it's like, can sound, like Sakya Ditti. Or is it just conventional reality? Samudsatya. It's just conventional, meaning it's merely a convention we use in social relationships, in being a citizen of a country, and being an individual in a group, and having a name and an identity, passport, ID card, pay the taxes, vote for the prime minister, like this. We operate on the conventional level. So that's not a criticism of the convention, but you see the liberation is being free from the convention, not getting rid of it, knowing a conventional reality as that, as anicca, dukkha, anatta, rather than as our real world or our real self. And this takes a strong determination to use everything in every opportunity of, where the sense of me and mine, my feelings, how I feel, my sensitivity, my position, my rights, what I think. And this can be, you can take it to extremes, like I'm the most important person in the world, or I'm the least important person in the world. So it's by getting to know this the extremities, and then the average, because you have to be a bit balmy to think you're the most important person in the world, even though we can live with that assumption and never recognizing it, because each one of us is, our life is the important one, because that's what we're living. Whether you think yourself important or unimportant, in the necessity of existing in a human form this is where we experience life, from this form, from this body, whatever condition it's in, whatever is happening to it. And then we might feel, that we're nobody, but that's another, but in terms of the practical realities of survival, of having to live as a human entity at this time, this is the center, isn't it? This is the center of the universe. It's not, I, Ajahn Sumedho, am the center of the universe. That would be like a kind of form of madness. But in just the reflective moment of this moment, the position you're in, the body, this is the center for the universe, as far as, you're watching, you're observing the universe from this point, within the limitations, boundaries, restrictions of the body that you have, in whatever posture it's in whatever, conditions are happening to it. But it's not about, I, Ajahn Sumedho, am the center of the universe, or I'm God. It's not a proclaiming or overestimating on a personal level. It's just a noticing that the realities of our life, whether you're the most unimportant mediocre nobody in the society or the most famous, beloved, admired individual member of this society, it's the same thing. Each one of us is the center of existence at this moment. And that's just the way it is. And so opening to, not interpreting it in terms of personality anymore, sakyaditi, but in awareness. Because then we have perspective. When we can see the way it is through wisdom rather than perceive the way it is through habits, through conventions. So Sakkaya Ditthi is a habit, it's a convention. And if we don't know it, then we are, we're imprisoned in that. Everything that happens to us has to be interpreted through I am, me and mine, through the conventional realities. So we never have any perspective on anything except about my feelings, and then the fears that come of being rejected or despised or humiliated, or the way that on a personal level, the fear that generates from asserting one's separateness makes us always frightened, because we're putting ourselves into a position of vulnerability. Because the ego depends on praise and blame. We want to be praised, respected, admired. We don't want to be blamed and rejected and humiliated. And so from the personal level, there's always fear around that. So with awareness, then we begin to recognize we have this perspective. There is the escape from that, from Sakkaya Ditthi. If there was not the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, there'd be no escape. We'd be trapped, helpless victims of the Sakkaya Ditthi we've acquired. And the Sakkaya Ditthi isn't always intended, in deliberate intention. We don't choose it. It happens to us. It's through circumstances, the sense of one's self-worth and important position and respected and loved and admired or rejected, or as at the bottom of the heap or the top of the heap. This is conditioned. Not that we particularly choose these attitudes or these assumptions. They happen to us through, the experiences that we have as an individual living in our families, in our society. Silabbata Paramasa also seen as cultural conditioning, social conditioning, assumptions we make as a social group, cultural biases, prejudices, attitudes. And then vicikicca, the doubting that is the result of asserting yourself endlessly as a person, as a separate person, through just the ignorance of Dhamma, through just the force of habit. It's hard to sustain a position as an important person for a whole lifetime, because conditions change. So a sense of my self-worth, which may be dependent on being loved by my mother and father and being protected from dangers and on and on like this, that, you can't sustain that level of good luck for a lifetime, because we're subject to all kinds of other conditions through the passage of time, through experience. So when our self-worth is dependent on being respected, admired, having power, position, authority, being appreciated and loved. These, when the conditions for that aren't present, then who are we? You know, we feel despair or anger, or resentment. Or maybe we've, been born into situations where we weren't wanted and weren't loved, we were criticized and blamed and despised. But in awareness, you see, the escape is the awakening to Sakya Ditti Silabhata Paramasa, not getting rid of them. It's like seeing things in perspective. And that's where this unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, it has no boundary, it doesn't have a form. It's not limited by form, it's not limited by size. And that is recognized, the reality of consciousness. Consciousness has no boundary in terms of right now. When you're just awareness, non-attached awareness, whether you're not coming from a conditioned position, has no boundary. Immeasurable, boundless. So in the scriptures they have the Vinyanang Anidasanang Anantang Sapato Pabang. This is the unlimited, unbounded light of consciousness. And then as we are operating from Sakya Ditti Silabhata Paramasa Vicikicca, we don't know that. We're operating from through consciousness, but out of ignorance. So it's habitual. We acquire the habits of a self. Everything is interpreted about what's happening to me and how I feel. So in this, and then the thinking mind is based on that ignorance. The thinking mind is dualistic. And so I emphasize, they get to recognize what thinking is. You can't, not to think about thinking or analyze thinking through thinking. You just go around in circles that way, thinking about thinking. But observing thinking, the thinking that's happening, whether it's arrogant thinking or intelligent thinking, whether it's reasonable thinking, righteous thinking, stupid, foolish, crazy, those are the quality. Thoughts can, the thinking, that's because of dualism, then they can go from one extreme to the other, from being very intelligent, reasonable, to being very unintelligent, very stupid and unreasonable. Thoughts, are not, is not, if we try to we try to be reasonable, don't we? Let's be reasonable about everything. Let's solve all our problems through just reasoning them out, through being rational, reasonable, sensible. We're all intelligent people, educated. Let's be reasonable about everything, and that's admired in the society, cultural conditioning. Now, being reasonable is certainly admirable, but it does depend on thinking to be reasonable. So then we tend to despise ourselves when we're not being reasonable. How many of you feel embarrassed or humiliated or worthless when your emotions take over and you're no longer reasonable? When you're caught up in emotional strong emotional feelings, nobody can be reasonable with that. Emotions aren't reasonable. So we get to recognize that emotional habits of feeling elated or depressed or secure or insecure or happy or sad or loved or hated or angry or broken-hearted or resentful, jealous, frightened, bored, depressed, despairing. So we say, cheer up, life passes. When somebody dies, the person whose loved one separates or dies, then we say, no, it'll pass. You could just, stiff upper lip, don't make a scene. It'll go away, you'll get used to it. And we all have to die anyway. Now that's being very reasonable, isn't it? It's so, it is, everybody has to die, we know that, that's reasonable. And we know that the loved ones, our parents or whatever, will die probably before we do. So we all know that our mothers and fathers have to die. That's reasonableness. But when it actually happens, what is it like? When your mother dies, and somebody says, well, we all have to die, is that very helpful? Because we know that already. But it's, that's reasonableness, but it's not very, helpful to the situation, because this is what I'm feeling, grief. When the mother dies, you feel this way, which may not be reasonable, but it is what it is. So, and reason depends on attachment to thinking. Logic, reason is a skillful use of the intellect. So it's not to be despised, but it also, if we bind ourselves to reasonableness, then we tend to deny how we're feeling, or judge it as in some negative way. So learning, like the Sakya Ditti is not necessarily, it isn't reasonable particularly. It's like this: feeling lonely, feeling nobody loves me, and feeling rejected by others. Or this can be totally unreasonable, based on nothing in particular that's happened, but it's just a kind of emotional habit that we have. And so this awareness then is where we can see it, see this feeling of, I feel so lonely, I could die kind of feeling. Or, my mother has died and I feel it's total despair and grief, is like this. And then some Buddhist comes along and says, everything's anicca, We all have to die. Thanks a lot, I'll call on you whenever I need comfort. But that's reasonable. Now, the emotional world is like this. And that which is aware of the emotion, that is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. And so it's it doesn't deny the emotion or suppress it, it recognizes it. It receives it. It knows it for what it is. And so it's not kind of judging it and saying, in kind of according to worldly values or reasonable attitudes, or justifying it. personally justifying all your feelings. But it's recognizing, it's like this, right now, the emotion, the feeling of this moment that exists in consciousness is like this. The unborn aware of the born, the created, rather than the created, the born, the created, trying to find nibbana, or trying to, being caught up in the proliferating habitual tendencies that result from attachment to conditions. So as long as we don't have that perspective, we are helpless victims of our conditioning. So that's why I particularly like this, there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, because to me that says everything. I don't have, I realize no matter how I see myself as a person, or the emotional habits I may have, and how life has treated me, and whatnot, is no longer, is no longer just helplessly a victim of it, of the society that I live in, of the people I live with, or the family that I'm in, or the group. Nor is it a rejection, nor a judgment of rebellion and anger and resentment, but it is seen clearly from the discerning position, knowing the unborn is this, in which the born can be observed, its nature to arise and cease. What is born dies. What is created is destroyed. What has a beginning has an ending. So this is anicca, dukkha, anatta. All conditions are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. Now the value of a tradition, such as the Theravada tradition that we're using, is to, it's a traditional form. It's not created by me or you. It comes from a lineage, and we regard it as going back to the Buddha of India 2,552 years ago. So that, it has a lineage, and of course that's also conditioned, isn't it? Traditions are conditions. So Theravada Buddhism is not the unborn, uncreated, but it is a convention that we've intentionally chosen. It's not been forced on us. Now, how to use this convention to break down, to see through, to reflect the Sakkaya Ditthi, Silabbata Paramasa Vicikicca. That's the point of this, the samana life, the monastic life, is not to reinforce Sakkaya Ditthi, Silabbata Paramasa Vicikicca, but to reflect it. So when we pay respect to Sangha, it's not to individuals. It's not like Buddhist monks and nuns are the Sangha that we respect. Yet on a conventional way, that is. It's a form. But when you start judging, your personal attitudes and reactions to the Buddhist monks, the nuns, that's Sakkaya Ditthi Silabbata Paramasa. That's not the Sangha. It's your own kind of feelings and personal reactions and memories and that arise when you think of Ajahn Sumedho or a member of the Sangha. It feels like this. So notice that our respect for Sangha it's no longer, the aim of the samana is to de-emphasize the personality, not to exploit myself as a personality, using my personality as how I live in the Sangha. So we have the Vinaya rules, the Patimokkha and so forth, as agreements on, it's not, I didn't invent the Patimokkha. It's not personal, not my invention, not, it was established by the Buddha. So this Patimokkha is the lineage, it holds the lineage, this 227 rule Patimokkha, that has sustained, that has been able to allow this tradition to survive through 2,552 years. So it's it's not to be just seen as some kind of perfunctory fortnightly recitation. It's just keeping the tradition going as a kind of personal loyalty to tradition. It's a recognition, a sense of Sangha, of gratitude, of respect for a convention that we've all voluntarily submitted ourselves to. So then people say, well, a lot of the rules don't really make any sense. There's some of the rules in it about, sitting mats made out of black lamb's wool and not mix it with white or something like that. Things that don't really apply to anything that we experience at this time. So we can criticize it. And we should get rid of those rules or change them. There's always, amongst Westerners, we're going to improve Buddhism. We're going to make Buddhism better. And I've seen this so many times with Western monks and nuns. That's always a sense of we're going to improve on it and reform it, make it up to date, modernize it. This is we can get rid of some of the rule about the sitting mat made out of black wool mixed with so many parts white wool or whatever. Well, let's just throw that away. It doesn't make any sense. So we can get into our Western mode, our Sakyaditi, Silabhatra Paramasa, Vicikicca position, and there's a lot to criticize. It isn't perfect. Patimokkha isn't kind of ultimate perfection, flawless rules, but it represents the Vinaya, and it's the actual convention that has allowed this tradition to survive to this very present moment. Just that, the Patimokkha. Without that, then the whole thing, it goes every which way. There's, just breaks up into personal views, opinions, gurus, cults. So it's just trying to reflect on the use of a convention. How to use it. It's not kind of just bind yourself to it with Sakyaditi Silabhatra Paramasa. But it does, when you think of it, gives, like when I think of this lineage from the Pali tradition, and that carried through to the present, to this present situation, it fills me with a kind of a sense of rapture, respect. Something that has survived for so long and still works. It's not just an archaic thing we're trying to breathe life into again, make it, try to resuscitate it. It actually has been able to survive through the rise and falls of how many kingdoms, civilizations, empires, wars, periods of great abundance and respect where Buddhism flourished and where it almost disappeared. So I mean, it's without that convention that holds the thing together, then it is a matter of each one for themselves. Whatever you think, whatever you want to do, however you want to interpret Buddhism. Now there's no central authority to enforce. That you've got to do it this way, or else you'll be burned at the stake. Now, especially in the Western world, you can do anything you want with it. So there's here in Europe or America, you've got endless variations, permutations on Buddhist themes. Modern Buddhism, gay Buddhism, black Buddhism. Everything is adjusted to individual conditions, which is, no, I'm not even criticizing that. If that's what people want to do, I'm not going to stop them or object to it, because it's we have a right to do whatever we want. It's not a convention or a religion that is oppressive. It's pretty free to do whatever you want as a Buddhist, actually. So you've got Nichiren Buddhism, you've got all kinds of, British Buddhism, American Buddhism. So but notice that this is not about my interpretation of Buddhism, but it's a willingness to surrender my interpretation or my desires about it, to reflect on them. It's impersonal, and this Sangha, monastic Sangha, isn't about a group of individuals, but about supatipanno, ujupatipanno, practicing directly in the right way. So it's not, and this is the value of respecting a tradition, because it's not personal. If I'd arranged Buddhist monasticism, it would be very different than this tradition. If I just decided to form my own cult and do what I wanted with it, then it would be very different. But in this, what I learned by living in Thailand with Luang Por Chah was, I could see my own arrogance and conceit and wanting, by having to live and follow a traditional form, which sometimes I didn't particularly see the point of it, or I thought I could see a better way to do things than the way they were doing it. I could, all kinds of conceits, cultural conceits, personal arrogance would be reflected through having to surrender and live within a structure that was not my creation, not my thing. So then the Siladhara form comes from that. It has that lineage connected to the Patimokkha. So it's not to be regarded as some kind of modern invention that is independent or lesser than. But recognize that in this tradition, the Patimokkha, Bhikkhu Patimokkha, is that which has preserved the lineage to the present time. And so that's why the sense of respect for that. For the Bhikkhu Sangha is not about respecting men or Buddhist monks are better than Buddhist nuns. It's not about giving those kind of messages, even though that's how many of you interpret it. It's about respect for for this tradition, which is based on the Patimokkha, 227 recitation every fortnight. Now we can see this personally, like, in terms of, gender issues and men always being first and women second. Now that is a cultural interpretation that can be seen in terms of Silabbata Paramasa or Sakya Ditti. Because this is a convention, it's an agreed way of living. So it's not promoting itself as that, that making statements about who's better or who's superior. It's just an agreed structure to live in, to reflect the Sakya Ditti, Silabbata Paramasa, Vicikicca that arise from it. So when we respect the Sangha, when the people bow to the Bhikkhu Sangha, the Siladharas bow to Bhikkhu Sangha, it's not proclaiming that somehow they're inferior. It's a noble sense of gratitude and respect for Sangha, not for individual monks, because there can be kind of personal resentments and that arise when you think of your personal relationships with each of us. But the Bhikkhu Sangha does represent that lineage that survived from the time of the Buddha. That Buddha established the Bhikkhu Sangha. That was the first established Sangha. So in a tradition, then, it has a structure. And this structure is this way. Structure doesn't mean we all are the same. When you have structure, you have to have one thing following another. So there's hierarchy, and hierarchy now is considered bad. I mean, being American, I remember, when I went to live in Asia, you had a class system or hierarchical structures. We're based on egalitarian values. American mindset is very much conditioned to egalitarian values and ideals about human rights, freedom, equality. Now, look at that, and it's pointing to those are beautiful ideals. But an ideal is just that, it's the best, that we can think of. An ideal is not a living, breathing, changing thing. You can have fixed ideals, always at the best, the best possible thing we can conceive of or think. And so egalitarianism, and that is their ideals. Now then the Buddha's pointing to Dhamma the way it is, conditions changing, to structure, to the conditioned phenomena. And our relationship to the conditioned phenomena is one of attachment and identity, or reflection and discernment. So this is where we transcend the structure through discernment. The liberation is through discerning the conditions rather than trying to arrange all the conditions according to modern attitudes or modern ideals or my personal wishes. You see, so this is like a wisdom teaching. It's for developing wisdom. And wisdom is not something that's very apparent in modern life. You know, our societies are not producing wisdom in this way. With all our democratic ideals, isn't it, and values and human rights and so forth, these are good things, but they also, because we don't have wisdom, we don't know what to do, you know, like communism, to force everybody to be a communist, to take all the riches away from the wealthy, kill the Tsar and his family, and force egalitarianism on everybody as an ideal, like we saw, you know, in my own lifetime, the Soviet system based on ideals of egalitarian equality and that, and then the goal. I mean, communism as an ideal is very fine. Everything should be distributed equally and fair, and there shouldn't be any classes or one person above another. We should all be exactly, you know, the same. Same rights, same privileges, same everything. And then that's forced on us. An ideal forced on you is a form of tyranny. You see, so trying to promote equality as an act of will out of ignorance, the result is tyranny. So in reflecting on the way it is, like we're in this perfect position right here and now to reflect on this, to be able to discern suffering and its causes, the cessation and the path. Now this has nothing to do with the position, whether you're a monk or a nun, or a lay person. It's not about that we have, you know, our knowledge of Dhamma is superior to the lay people. And then a sakyaditi, isn't it? Somehow, you know, I should be respected because I'm somehow more serious, or I've dedicated my life to the Dhamma, and I could promote myself as a kind of inspiring person that you should all respect and admire, which would be sakyaditi again. So it's this reflectiveness of seeing that sakyaditi, an attachment to sakyaditi out of ignorance, will always give me some sense of fear, anxiety, worry, because it's putting me into that realm of change where I lose perspective, where I am threatened. The conditioned body, isn't it? The body getting old. Anything could happen to it. You don't know what's going on inside. All these liver and kidneys and the guts inside this body, they're pretty old by now, 75 years old. They're wearing out. And so mentally, you don't, I don't, how my liver's doing or whatever, I don't even know till I have a checkup and then get somebody's opinion through some kind of doctor's authority. But the conditioned body definitely is, it's changing and it's getting old and will die. And so this is, if my dependency for security lay on being healthy, then at this age, don't count on good health as your security. But bad health is not an obstruction either, is it? The sakyaditi is. So if you're not healthy, it's not an obstruction to enlightenment. Sakyaditi is the fetter, isn't it? Personality view, the ego, silabbata paramasa, binding yourself to cultural prejudices, attitudes, positions, and even binding yourself to Theravada Buddhism from ignorance, binding yourself to Patimokkha rules out of ignorance, binding yourself to your own views about tradition, about right and wrong, good and bad, true and false. This is, that is the causes of suffering. If we're just caught, helplessly trapped into this, stuck on the spider's web, the butterfly in the net. You're trapped in that. It's a trap of the conditioned realm. But if you recognize, discern, there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, that's the gate to the deathless. That is the amadasa tawara, the gate to the deathless. That is the escape from the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. And this you have to find for yourself. It's like taking the horse to water. Okay, I've taken you, all you horses, to the water during this retreat, I hope. I don't see how I could... That's what I've been pointing at all this time. This is it. And then, whether you drink it or not, you can't force the horse to drink the water. So what I've said today is for reflection. I'm not coming from ex cathedra. This is a reflective style. Meant to understand the value of tradition. If if one doesn't like the tradition, you don't have to stay in it. You can find another tradition or another form, or create your own. But there's no laws, or there's no punishments for doing that. But if you want to use a tradition for liberation, then this is the opportunity that we offer here. That's its purpose, so that it is a convention for liberation, not for increasing suffering or the ego. It's not a statement about being better or worse than any other tradition. It's just, this is how this tradition works. How, if you're interested and have confidence enough try this out, then this is how to use it. And it does work, it isn't a waste of time, it will, get to the causes of suffering if you're willing to determine to practice with it, use it properly.